How come some tracks are just so catchy, so memorable, and just suck you in? And how can you get that for your tracks? Well, stick around, because I'm going to show you. Hey guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about motifs, what they are and how you can utilize them to make your tracks more catchy, more hooky, more memorable. So first let me clarify what's the difference between a hook and a motif. A hook is generally going to be something that's the most attention-grabbing element of your track, often the chorus of the lead vocal, right? In other tracks it might be a really distinct melody or riff, but generally a motif is a repeating, often melodic idea that helps to give the track identity, whereas a hook is an attention-grabbing element, often having a big moment in a track. In underground electronic music, the lines can often be blurred, as we'll see in some examples, and in these cases the distinction between a hook and a motif would be where they're kind of presented in the track. For example, a motif might be running throughout, and then the arrangement is used to present it in a much more exciting, memorable way. Maybe having built tension in a break, everything stops, the hook plays, or the motif plays before the track drops. In this case, that would be demonstrating it as the hook. Don't worry, it'll all become clear when I show you some examples, hopefully. Just quickly, if you like the track that's playing in the background, it's a new one of mine. There's a link in the description to Beatport and Spotify if you want to go and check that out. Your support is always much appreciated. And as always, you can download the project files from this video. There's a link in the description to Patreon, which is one of the best ways that you can support the channel and make sure I bring you these videos every week. Now let's get into Ableton and make some motifs. So for something a little bit different and to demonstrate motifs and how they can be used to great effect, I've done something a little bit different here. I've actually recreated some classic tracks that utilize really, really strong motifs. In some cases, the motifs are even stronger than the hook, and they really kind of are the foundation of the track, and they are what makes the track memorable. But I need to caveat this, these are not intended to be perfect recreations, and if anything, it demonstrates how the motifs, the themes of these tracks are so strong that they can be instantly recognizable and just as good when implemented badly. So these are not perfect recreations by any means, and especially in terms of the drums, I've basically just used the same beat for each, with a different top loop to differentiate each one. And all of the sounds for this have come from Underground Shades of House Volume 2, which is obviously a very versatile pack. I'll put a link to that up here in the description. So let's take a look at the first one. What I want to show you here is basically how we're using this reoccurring theme across multiple elements to create such a strong, recognizable part of a track, but it's not really the hook. Let's take a listen and you'll see what I mean. So in this track, it's a full vocal track, amazing track. Osunlade Envision, the ARM remix. The vocal is clearly like the hook of the track, right? But we've taken this melody from the vocal, this can't envision it, and they have basically used that in the melodic parts of the track to strengthen the whole kind of memorability of the track. Is it a word, memorability? How memorable the track is. And it's being recreated in the bass line as well. So I've basically done this without really nailing the sound design, but it is memorable, it's recognizable, right? Without this vocal, which is the hook. So that is a really strong, recognizable motif. There's also like a secondary motif in this, which comes in quite early in the track, and it's the rhythm of the bass line, and it's the rhythm of this synth. And I would say the motif is the combination of this, and I think in the actual track, it's got this synth playing the same as the bass line, and then it's got a secondary synth, which is playing up higher. I've just done it in one synth. this dun 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 dun, super recognizable. When that's playing, comes in, you know what track it is. The vocal hasn't started, you haven't heard the riff yet, but it's recognizable. So that's a really strong motif. So example 2, let's see if you can get this one. Some of you might have got it already. This is how the track starts. Now in here, I'm going to insert the hook. So this is an interesting one because the motif is almost a hook because it's so strong. So the motif, I would say, is this kind of synth progression here, synth riff. So that's the simplified version. It comes in with just, it's this part, this first half bar looped. But it's almost in the actual track, it's strong enough that that's recognizable. Then it's developed in this part where we have this kind of progression, which is the repetition of this part, into this change, into this like distinct riff. But in the actual track, I would say like the sax is kind of like the star of the show. So this is like a really strong foundation, like musical foundation. That's what the track is kind of about. You're supposed to go like, wow, it's this big improvised saxophone thing. But this motif, if it was just the sax playing over a beat, turn off this motif. This isn't isolated, unfortunately, because I've taken this using stem splitting, but you can kind of hear the hook is almost not as strong as the motif. Crazy. Now we're getting into another kind of example that's almost starting to blur the lines because it's a much more minimal, stripped back track. So I would say that kind of this single melodic element here is almost like the hook of the track. And I would say that this motif, which is basically the bass line and the organ, or the sub and the organ, is stronger than the hook. You know, that's instantly recognizable. I would say that kind of stands up. The track probably works because of the arrangement and the kind of additional elements in there that help to push the arrangement forward and keep tension and release. It probably works without the vocal because the motif is strong enough. You could argue that maybe the vocal, the way they're combined with the two different sample sources, so this one and then these ones. You could argue that maybe that's like a secondary motif, but in this case we're going to call that the hook. And I would say the motif trumps the hook. So I've got my final example here. So in this case, I think the motif is stronger than the hook. I'm going to say that this kind of brass thing, brass melody, is like the hook. It doesn't happen all throughout the track, and when it's presented, it's normally presented by itself at a kind of crescendo of the track. And these vocal chops that MK has done are pretty much all the way through the track. They don't really change. They're like a foundational kind of element of the track, but they're so well done and so memorable that they kind of make the track and they become the part that's instantly recognizable and the kind of pseudo hook. So I think we can see from these examples that motifs can be an essential building block of a track and how they can basically become the earworm that makes the track so memorable while supporting the hook or the main element of the track. As always, you can download the project files for this from Patreon. There's this project and like so many more. There's lots of stuff to learn there. Alright guys, there you go. I hope that was informative, educational, and perhaps mildly entertaining. If you've got anything to add to the conversation, let me know in the comments. And I would love to know, what are the tracks that you think have the strongest motifs? If you enjoy this kind of content and you're looking for something to watch next, then check out this video. I think you're going to like it. Well, that's it from me today. Catch you next time. Peace.